I still remember the sound my inbox made that morning. Just one small notification. A tiny click. But somehow, it felt loud enough to shake my whole life. I had spent months working toward that promotion. Late nights. Early mornings. Finishing projects no one else wanted. Taking responsibilities nobody asked me to take. And through all of it, I kept hearing my boss, Melissa, say the same thing. You're the top choice, Mark. Stay focused, you're right there. So when I opened that email, I expected something good. Maybe a congratulations. Maybe a meeting invite to make it official. Anything but what I actually saw. 9 words, cold, empty, no emotion at all. Thank you for applying. We selected another candidate instead. For a second, I honestly thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked. Read it again. My hands felt numb, like the room had suddenly dropped 10 degrees. Another candidate? Who? How? I scrolled down, looking for details. And there it was. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Daniel, the new guy. 6 months at the company. Still asked me where we kept basic files. Still leaned on me for help with the simplest tasks. I stared at the screen, trying to understand. Trying to breathe. Trying not to let the disappointment crash straight through me. Because the truth was, I had counted on this. I had already pictured telling my family. I had already imagined that first day in the new role. I had already believed Melissa when she said I was ready. And now? It felt like someone had quietly shut the door. I'd been walking toward for years, but confusion quickly turned into something sharper. Something heavier. Something that sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. Why him? Why Daniel of all people? Why someone with no experience in the systems I had mastered? I kept going over everything in my mind, trying to stay calm. Trying to convince myself there had to be a good reason. Maybe leadership wanted someone with a different background. Maybe they saw something I didn't. But the truth kept whispering in the back of my mind. This doesn't make sense. I pushed my chair back and stood up, pacing slowly across my living room. My thoughts were running, spinning, trying to land somewhere that didn't hurt. And the more I thought about it, the more one detail refused to leave me alone. Melissa had told me again and again that I was the front runner. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't making small talk. She said it with confidence, like the decision was practically done. So how did it flip so suddenly? I sat back down and read the email a 4th time. Then a 5th. Every sentence felt colder the more I stared at it. Thank you for applying. Like I was some stranger. Like the months I put in meant nothing. Like the late nights didn't matter. And another candidate. As if Daniel wasn't handpicked out of nowhere. My chest tightened. My jaw clenched. The disappointment started to mix with another feeling, one I didn't want to admit at first. Suspicion. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to look yet, something told me this wasn't random. This wasn't just a fair decision that didn't go my way. Someone had pushed things in a certain direction. Someone had changed the story before I ever got a chance to tell mine. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But in that moment, staring at that email, I felt it in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. Something or someone made it happen. And I was going to find out who. I didn't always question Melissa. In fact, there was a time when I trusted her more than anyone else at work. And looking back now, maybe that's what hurts the most. She wasn't just my boss. She was the person who always said things like, "Mark, you're reliable. You're solid. You're someone I can count on." Words that felt good. Words that made me believe she actually meant well. When I first joined the company, she was the one who welcomed me. She showed me how things worked. She told me I had potential. And for years, I believed she saw something in me that others didn't. So when the opening for the promotion came up, her support felt real. She pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Listen, you're the top candidate. Keep doing what you're doing. I still remember the tone of her voice, calm, confident, like she had already made up her mind. Hearing that from your boss, it hits differently. It fills you with this quiet pride, the kind that makes you work even harder. And I did. I worked harder than I ever had. I took on extra reports. I trained new hires. I stayed long after everyone else left the building. I fixed problems before she even knew they existed, not because I was desperate, but because I trusted her promise. There were nights when I drove home exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open, but feeling like it was worth it. Like all the effort was building towards something bigger. Something earned. And she kept feeding that hope. Every weekly meeting, she'd smile and say, "You're right on track," or "You're exactly what we're looking for." She made me believe the role was already halfway mine. And I let myself believe her. That trust, that confidence, that feeling of being seen. It carried me through days when the workload felt impossible. So when that rejection email hit, the shock wasn't just about losing the promotion. It was about losing everything I thought we had built over the years. The respect, the mutual understanding, the promise that hard work mattered. I kept replaying every conversation in my head. Every smile she gave me. Every time she said she appreciated my effort. Were those moments real? Or was she just keeping me motivated, keeping me useful, keeping me in place? That question bothered me more than anything else. I thought back to the last meeting we had before the decision came out. She looked me right in the eye and said, "This is your moment, Mark. Stay focused this week." She said it like someone cheering for you. Like someone rooting for your win. But if she truly believed that, how did things change so suddenly? And why didn't she say a single word before the rejection email arrived? No explanation. No warning. Nothing. It felt like the floor I'd been standing on for years suddenly broke under me. And yet, even with all that confusion, a small part of me kept trying to defend her. Telling myself maybe she didn't have a choice. Maybe leadership decided something at the last minute. Maybe she was just as surprised as I was. I wanted so badly to believe that. I wanted to believe the trust I gave her wasn't misplaced. But then I remembered something small, but sharp enough to cut through all of my excuses. Melissa wasn't the type to stay silent. She always communicated. She always followed up. She always prepared me for changes. So why not this time? Why would she let me find out through a cold email instead of pulling me aside? Why would she avoid me that entire morning, not even looking in my direction? Why would she speak so confidently before, and so vaguely afterward? Piece by piece, the trust I once had in her began to crumble. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in small, quiet cracks that kept spreading wider. Until finally, one thought stepped forward. A thought I couldn't ignore anymore. Something doesn't add up. And maybe she knew more than she ever told me. I walked into the office the next morning with a tight feeling in my chest. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept circling the same question again and again. How did everything change overnight? I told myself I needed answers, real answers, and the only person who could give them was Melissa. When I reached her office, she was typing something on her laptop. She looked up and gave me this warm smile. A smile that once felt reassuring, but now felt strangely hollow. "Mark, hey, come in," she said, like we were about to have a friendly chat. I sat down, keeping my tone calm. "Melissa, I got the email yesterday. I just wanted to understand what happened." She nodded slowly, almost too slowly. I know. I'm sorry you had to find out that way," she said. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes didn't match it. "I thought things were going well," I said quietly. "I thought I was the top candidate." Something flickered across her face, not guilt, but hesitation. Then she shifted into that polished tone she used in meetings. "Well, the final decision wasn't mine," she said. "Leadership wanted someone with a different outlook. Daniel offered that. There it was. A smooth answer. A clean explanation. Too clean. I studied her expression. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her voice felt rehearsed, almost like she'd practiced this speech ahead of time. I just want to know if there was something I did wrong, I asked. Not out of weakness, but because I needed to hear her say something real. Oh no, not at all, she replied quickly. You're great, Mark, really. It just wasn't the right moment for you. Not the right moment? She'd told me last week it was the right moment. The cracks in her smile were starting to show, but I stayed calm. I thanked her for her time, stood up, and walked out as the door closed behind me. I felt a tightness building in my throat. Not sadness, but something sharper. Something didn't feel honest. Something was being kept from me. I went back to my desk, trying to breathe through the frustration. Trying to convince myself that maybe I was overthinking it. But just before lunch, 2 coworkers approached me, quietly, nervously, like they didn't want anyone to see them talking to me. One of them whispered, "Mark, we heard something. We thought you should know." My heart slowed. "What is it?" The other coworker glanced around before speaking. "Melissa. She wasn't being truthful. She blocked your promotion." I felt the air leave my lungs. Blocked it? What do you mean? They exchanged looks, then continued. She told leadership you weren't ready. That you didn't handle pressure well. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Me? Not ready? I had carried half the team last quarter. I trained Daniel myself. I stepped up every time the department was drowning. The coworker added quietly. We didn't think it was fair. That's why we wanted you to know. My hands curled into fists without me realizing. Not from anger, from disbelief. Why would she say that? Why would she tell leadership the exact opposite of what she told me? Pieces started shifting in my mind. Her sudden distance. Her empty expressions. Her overly smooth explanation. It all began to form a shape I didn't want to see. Was she protecting Daniel? Was she choosing someone easier to guide? Or was she trying to keep me in the same place because it benefited her? I didn't know the answer yet. But the trust I once had was already fading fast. After my coworkers left, I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen. Though I wasn't really looking at anything, I replayed every conversation. Every compliment. Every promise. It all felt different now. Like the entire story had been rewritten behind my back. And as the hours passed, a new feeling settled inside me. Quiet, steady, determined. If she really blocked me. If she lied to leadership. If she misled me for months. Then I needed to know why. And I wasn't going to find that answer by sitting still. So that evening, as the office emptied out, I stayed at my desk and opened every file, every email, every document tied to the promotion process. Because something wasn't right. Something was hidden. And I was done taking things at face value. The truth was out there. And I had just started digging. I didn't expect to find anything surprising that night at the office. Most promotion records were locked away, and I wasn't high enough to access them. But I figured if Melissa had hidden something, it would eventually show itself in the way people acted around her. And I was right, because the next few days revealed more than any file ever could. It started small little moments I'd never paid attention to before. Daniel following Melissa like a shadow. Her giving him these approving smiles whenever he repeated something she said. Him nodding at every suggestion she made, even when it didn't make sense. It felt weird. But I kept observing. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation that made everything click into place. I was walking past the break room when I heard Daniel say, "Whatever you need, Melissa, I'm ready for it. I trust your judgment." Melissa responded with this soft laugh, a laugh that made my skin crawl in a way it never had before. "You're great, Daniel," she said. "You follow direction. You stay aligned. That's exactly what leadership looks for. Aligned. That word stuck with me. Aligned didn't mean skilled. It didn't mean experienced. It didn't even mean capable. It meant controlled. For the first time I saw the pattern clearly. Melissa didn't want the best candidate. She wanted the most obedient one, someone who owed her. Someone who would echo her decisions. Someone who made her feel powerful. And suddenly, her actions toward me made perfect sense. I wasn't hard to manage, but I wasn't someone she could shape either. I questioned things. I offered new ideas. I pushed for better solutions, even when it meant challenging her. To me, that was being a good team member. To her, it was a threat. I moved away from the break room door before they noticed me, but my heart raced. My mind was spinning. It wasn't about qualifications. It wasn't about leadership skills. It wasn't about performance reviews. It was about control. Melissa saw Daniel as the perfect project, someone she could build up and direct however she wanted. Someone who would make her look good, and me? I was the opposite of everything she wanted to shape. The more I thought about it, the more moments came back to me like scenes in a movie. Her dismissive tone whenever I suggested improvements. Her quick praise when Daniel agreed with her. Her forced smiles whenever I solved a problem without her guidance. Her relief whenever I stayed quiet in meetings instead of offering ideas. She didn't want me stuck because I wasn't good enough. She wanted me stuck because I was independent. But the moment that truly broke what was left of my trust happened the next morning. I came in early, grabbing coffee before the office buzz began. 2 senior managers were talking in the hallway. They didn't see me at first, and I heard one of them say, "Melissa mentioned Mark wasn't ready for more responsibility. Said he's too ambitious, might outgrow the team." Too ambitious. Outgrow the team. And the manager laughed, replying, "Funny. Because I've only seen good work from him." I stepped back before they noticed me. But the damage was done. She didn't just block my promotion. She explained it to others in a way that shut down my potential, as if ambition was something dangerous. As if wanting to grow meant I was a problem. As if success was something she needed to keep out of my reach. My stomach tightened. My hands shook around my coffee cup. Ambition wasn't the issue. Ambition was the threat. To her. In that moment, something changed inside me. The shock faded. The confusion faded. Even the sadness began to fade. What grew in its place was something steady. Something clear. Something sharp. Determination. If she thought I would quietly accept this. She didn't know me at all. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my story. I wasn't going to let her decide what I deserved. I wasn't going to let her keep me in a place that benefited only her. I walked to my desk with a new purpose, because now I knew the truth. And once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't walk into HR looking for revenge. At that point, I just needed answers, real answers, not the polished lines Melissa had given me. Something in my gut told me the truth was buried somewhere deeper. Somewhere official. When I stepped into the HR office, the air felt different. Quieter, almost heavier. The HR manager, a calm woman named Jenna, looked up from her desk. "Mark, is everything all right?" she asked. I took a slow breath. "I just want to review my employment contract," I said. "Specifically anything tied to promotions or internal mobility." She didn't question me. She simply nodded and pulled up my file. A few minutes later, she handed me a digital copy and said I could sit in a small conference room to read it. I thanked her and walked over, closing the door behind me. I wasn't expecting much, probably something I already knew. But as I scrolled through the contract, one section caught my eye. Section 4.3, Internal Mobility Guarantee. The words felt almost strange. Like I was reading something meant for someone else. It stated, "If 2 or more senior colleagues formally recommend an employee for advancement, the employee must be granted a full consideration review, including written justification for any denial." signed by all decision makers. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower. 2 or more recommendations. I already knew I had that. Not because I was guessing, but because those managers had told me directly that they supported my promotion. Meaning, if I had multiple recommendations, there had to be written documentation explaining why I was denied. Not verbal notes, not casual comments. A written justification signed by everyone involved, including Melissa. I leaned back in my chair, feeling my pulse pick up. So either leadership followed the rules and had written reasons, or they ignored Section 4.3 entirely, and if they ignored it, someone had pushed for that. Someone had made sure the process didn't go the way it was supposed to. My fingers tightened around the edge of the laptop. For the first time since the rejection email, I felt a spark of something that wasn't sadness or frustration. Hope. Because this wasn't just a workplace guideline. This was a requirement, a rule, a safeguard for situations exactly like mine. I stepped out of the conference room and approached Jenna again. Can I request the full consideration review documentation for my promotion denial? I asked. She nodded without hesitation. Of course. It should take about 3 business days to gather everything. 3 days. Almost 72 hours. It didn't sound like much, but in that moment, it felt like a lifetime. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of wondering what was in those documents. 3 days of imagining the excuses Melissa might have written. As I walked back to my desk, my mind raced ahead of my footsteps. If Section 4.3 was followed, I'd see exactly why they said I wasn't ready. I'd see who said what. I'd see whether the decision was fair or manipulated. But if Section 4.3 wasn't followed, then I had something even stronger. Something that could expose the truth in a way no rumor or hallway conversation ever could. I sat down and stared at my blank monitor, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation swirl inside me. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about fairness, about respect, about acknowledging the effort I'd put in for years. I replayed the words in the contract one more time in my head, written justification, signed by all decision makers. If Melissa had lied, if she had twisted the truth, if she had written something that didn't match what the managers actually believed, those documents would reveal everything. 3 days. Just 3 days until the truth came out. But deep down, I already felt it. A shift. A turning point. Something almost electric in the air. This clause wasn't just a small detail in a contract. This clause was leverage. This clause was protection. This clause was the one thing she hadn't expected me to find. And for the first time since everything started, I sensed something powerful. This might change everything. The morning the HR email arrived, my heart jumped before I even opened it. 3 days had passed, slow, tense, heavy days, and now the denial file was finally sitting in my inbox. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I didn't know whether I was ready for what I was about to read. But I clicked anyway. A PDF opened. Page 1 looked formal, almost cold. But what mattered wasn't the format. It was the truth hidden inside it. I started scrolling, and right away, I saw the section labeled Manager Feedback. The first comments were written by a senior colleague named Robert. Mark demonstrates strong initiative and consistent leadership. He handles pressure well and guides newer staff when needed. I felt a small swell of pride. Then I kept reading. Another manager wrote, highly recommend Mark for promotion. Reliable, skilled, respected. The next, Mark has the capabilities needed for advancement and excels under tight deadlines. And a fourth, excellent candidate. Shows growth and independence. 4 glowing recommendations. 4 people who saw my work for what it truly was. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with relief. These were the voices I trusted. These were the people who knew what I actually contributed. Then, I scrolled further down, and there it was, Melissa's section. Her tone was completely different, cold, clipped, almost dismissive. Mark lacks consistent initiative. Needs stronger communication skills. May struggle with leadership responsibilities. I blinked, once. Twice. It felt like reading a description of a stranger. Someone who shared my name but none of my actual work. I whispered to myself, this is not true. None of this is true. It didn't match anything I had shown. It didn't match anything those 4 managers said. It didn't match the long nights, the extra responsibilities, the projects I carried alone. She didn't misjudge me. She misrepresented me, and she signed her name under it. A wave of heat moved through my body, anger mixing with something sharper, steadier. I scrolled to the bottom. The denial was based on concerns raised by direct manager. Concerns that did not exist in real life. Concerns she invented. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the truth settle in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate, but instead of reacting with frustration, a surprising calm washed over me. Because now I had proof, real, written, signed proof, not rumors, not guesses, not hallway whispers, a documented paper trail. I stood up, straightened my posture, and gathered my thoughts. If I handled this emotionally, it could backfire. But if I handled it professionally, it could turn everything around. I printed the file, placed it in a neat folder, and walked toward the executive floor. Every step felt heavier than the last, but also more certain. When I reached the vice president's office, I knocked lightly. "Come in," he said. He looked surprised to see me, but in a polite way. "Mark, what brings you here?" I took a breath. "Sir, I'd like your help reviewing something. It's related to the recent promotion decision." He motioned for me to sit. I handed him the folder. As he read, his eyebrows slowly drew together. He flipped from one page to the next, then back again. Finally, he set the papers down and looked straight at me. "Mark, why do her comments oppose everyone else's?" He asked quietly. "I don't know," I replied. But I felt the decision might not reflect my actual performance. That's why I asked for the documentation. He tapped his finger on the folder. "This is serious. Very serious." A silence filled the room, not empty but charged. He stood up. "I'm going to look into this personally," he said. "I appreciate you bringing it to me." And in that moment, I knew a fuse had been lit, a fuse Melissa never saw coming. Because this wasn't about opinions anymore. This was about facts, about truth, about a paper trail that exposed everything she tried to hide. And once the truth starts moving, it doesn't stop. I knew something big was coming when the VP's assistant emailed me a mandatory meeting invitation for the next morning. No details, no agenda, just a time and a room number. My stomach tightened, but not from fear. More like anticipation, the kind you feel right before a storm breaks. When I walked into the conference room, the tension hit me instantly. The VP was there. HR was there. Daniel was there, sitting stiffly in his chair. And then there was Melissa. She turned when I entered, giving me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that looked more like a mask than anything real. "Mark, glad you could join us," she said, trying to sound calm, but her voice carried a tiny tremor. The VP cleared his throat, directing everyone's attention. "Let's begin," he said. "We're here to discuss the recent promotion decision and some concerns that have come to light." Melissa straightened her posture. Daniel stared at the table. HR folded her hands gently, waiting. The VP opened the folder, my folder, and set it in front of him. "Melissa," he said carefully, "your written evaluation of Mark does not match the assessments of the other 4 senior managers." Her face froze for a split second. Then she forced a confident smile. "Well, I was simply being honest," she said. "Mark does good work, of course, but he can be inconsistent under pressure. HR looked up immediately. That does not align with the documented performance reports, she said calmly. In fact, the reports show the opposite. Melissa blinked. Maybe they overlooked some concerns. 4 different managers? The VP interrupted. All of them wrote strong recommendations. All of them highlighted his reliability and leadership. Her lips tightened, just slightly. He's not always collaborative, she said, reaching for something, anything. Sometimes he works independently. That can be difficult. I almost couldn't believe she said that. Working independently was the reason half our projects even got done. The VP tapped the folder again. Even if that were true, he said, you still violated Section 4.3 of our internal mobility policy. Now her confidence cracked. Section, what? She asked, even though she knew exactly what he meant. HR opened her own copy of the contract. Section 4.3 requires written, accurate justification when a candidate with multiple recommendations is denied, she explained. Accurate justification, Melissa. Not personal preference. Not opinion dressed as fact. The room felt like it was shrinking. Melissa's face grew tense, her breathing shallow. I didn't realize. The VP stopped her with a raised hand. This is not a small mistake, he said firmly. This affected someone's career and the integrity of our process. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding everyone's gaze. He looked like he'd just realized his promotion sat on unstable ground. The VP turned to me. Mark, the documentation clearly shows you were evaluated unfairly. Based on the recommendations and your record, we are restoring the promotion to you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, not with sadness this time, but relief. Thank you, I finally managed to say. He nodded. Then continued, and Melissa, effective immediately. Your leadership responsibilities will be reassigned until further review. The room fell silent. Melissa's eyes widened, her jaw trembling slightly. Not anger, shock. Because she had been exposed. Not with shouting or accusations, but with truth. Pure, written truth. She opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, maybe to plead. But nothing came out. The VP closed the folder gently, signaling the meeting was over. As everyone stood, Daniel muttered a quick congratulations without meeting my eyes. He wasn't the villain, just someone caught in the echo of Melissa's choices. I walked out of that room feeling something I hadn't felt since the beginning. Justice. Not loud, not dramatic, not a scene from a movie. Just calm, steady justice. Because in the end, I didn't have to expose her with anger. She exposed herself through contradictions, through manipulation, through the paper trail she thought nobody would check. And the truth? The truth did exactly what the truth always does. It lit the path forward and shut down the lies behind me. The first morning I stepped into my new role, the office felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just clearer. Maybe it was the quiet pride sitting in my chest. Maybe it was the sudden calm after weeks of tension. Or maybe it was the feeling of finally standing in a place I had earned. Not through favoritism, not through politics, but through persistence. As I walked down the hallway, people greeted me with small smiles, subtle nods, and quiet congratulations. Not the loud, dramatic kind you see in movies, but the genuine kind. The kind that says, we saw what you went through. You deserved this. I sat at my new desk and exhaled slowly, letting the weight of everything settle. After everything Melissa tried to do. After every quiet attempt to block my path. After all the manipulation hidden behind small smiles. I was still here. I made it. And I didn't have to destroy anyone to get here. That was the part that surprised me the most. I thought justice had to be loud. I thought it had to roar. I thought it meant confronting someone, proving them wrong to their face. But in the end, Justice whispered. It spoke through paperwork, through facts, through truth that couldn't be twisted or dressed up as something else. I leaned back in my chair and thought about everything that led me here. What did I learn? I learned that ambition scares people who rely on control. Some leaders don't want strong team members, they want quiet followers. And when they find someone who doesn't fit that mold, they try to keep them small. Not because the person lacks ability, but because their independence feels like a threat. I learned that betrayal doesn't always show up with shouting or obvious conflict. Sometimes it comes with a friendly tone, a reassuring smile, a promise whispered in a hallway. I learned that the hardest part of being underestimated is pretending it doesn't bother you. But I also learned something else, something stronger. The truth always waits for the right moment. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand attention. It simply sits quietly until someone brave enough shines a light on it. And when that moment came, when the vice president saw the contradictions, when HR pointed out the policy violations, when Melissa's excuses fell apart, the truth didn't shout. It didn't slam doors. It didn't humiliate anyone. It just stood there, steady and undeniable, and the entire situation shifted around it. I glanced out the window, watching cars pass on the street below. Part of me wondered if Melissa ever thought about what happened. Maybe she realized her control had limits. Maybe she understood that holding someone down eventually exposes the person doing the holding. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she still believed she could shape people however she wanted. But that wasn't my story to worry about anymore. My story was about rising, quietly, steadily, without bending who I was, because some people block doors out of fear. Fear of losing power. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of someone else shining brighter than they expected. Some people betray because they can't control you, because your ambition reminds them of their own insecurities, because your independence exposes the weakness in their leadership. But the truth doesn't need anger to win. It doesn't need revenge to feel powerful. It doesn't need noise to be heard. Sometimes, the truth is the greatest form of justice. As I sat there in my new role, I realized something important, something I wish I had understood earlier. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to stand your ground long enough for the truth to speak for you. I smiled to myself, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. This wasn't just a new chapter in my career. It was a reminder, no matter who tries to hold you back, no matter who tries to rewrite your worth, the truth has a way of turning everything around. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something simple, powerful, and real. Peace. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that truth still matters, and that quiet strength can rise even when someone tries to hold you down, then don't leave without letting your voice be heard. Tap like, leave a comment, subscribe, not just for the channel, but to help these stories reach someone who feels stuck the way I once did. Your support tells the world that resilience matters, that justice can still whisper and win, and that nobody gets to decide your worth except you. So stay with us. More stories are coming. And remember, your path isn't over. Sometimes the quietest comeback becomes the strongest one.